Hi everyone! So we are going to make probably one of my favorite desserts. This is my version on it, so it's going to have one kind of non-Vietnamese ingredient, and this is traditionally made with glutinous sweet rice, but because I'm a glutton, I normally put tapioca in it instead. So essentially, Che is this kind of broad blanket term for a dessert soup. And there are all kinds of different Ches, and today I'm going to make Che Bap, which is corn dessert soup. I know it has a very unexciting translation, but let's see what the ingredients are. So here I have 2 cans of 13.5 fluid ounces of coconut milk. Right next to it, I have tapioca. This is specifically tapioca from Thailand. American tapioca exists. What I don't always like about American tapioca is that for some reason the manufacturers feel that they have to crush up the actual pearls, which makes no sense to me, or you have to buy actual pearls from kind of like the organic section of a grocery store, which is insane.
Rip off!
If you go to an Asian grocery store, this is pretty standard stuff. And so if you can find it, just get the normal tapioca. This is kind of the smaller pearl size. There's definitely bigger. If you like bigger pieces of tapioca, you can definitely do that too. And then next to it, we have just some cinnamon. That's the one really non-Vietnamese ingredient. I think it just tastes nice. Next to it, we have our sugar container. Because this is a dessert soup, of course, expect that there's going to be a lot of sugar. And then outside of that, we have corn. Here we have 5 very pretty ears of corn, and we're going to next peel off all the husks, and then I'll show you how exactly I actually shave the corn from the cob. Of course, if it's not corn season, you can make this with frozen corn. I've made it with frozen corn many, many times. Because we found some fresh corn today, we are going to use fresh corn. So we've taken all of the husks off of the corn, and now I'm just going to begin to shave the corn off of the cob itself. So what I normally do is make sure you take the fatter end of the corn and stand it up. It's going to be your anchor for holding. And then just take a sharp knife and begin to scrape the kernels off.
And I should also mention too that besides removing the husks, we're really careful about getting rid of as much of the silk as possible. Correct?
Yes, exactly. Because when we're going to cook this into the soup, and the consistency is very strange if you have the silk in there. So that's the first pass. So if you notice, there's still more corn here. So what I normally do is I go all the way around and get that first kind of outer layer of corn, and then I'll do a second pass with the knife and get everything else that is left over, because even though you might not get to see the parts because they will eventually cook down, this adds a lot of nice sweetness to the dessert as well. So we'll continue shaving all of this, and then I'll see you back when we're finally ready to put this all in the pot. Alright, so we finished scraping off all the corn, and all the corn is now in a bowl.
Ta-da!
So when you are done scraping, this is what the cob will look like. What I normally do is I do 2 rounds of just kind of cutting the meat off, and then I take my knife and I just scrape off the cores of the corn just to see if I can get any extra little bits of meat, because like I had mentioned before, it adds a nice sweetness to the actual dessert. So now that all of that is done, we're actually going to put the corn to the side because I am going to heat up the coconut milk. So we're going to leave this actually on probably medium, because coconut milk will burn, so keep that in mind. So we're actually just going to pour both cans of coconut milk in. This is probably one of the simpler dishes by far. Alrighty.
Excellent.
And now I'm actually going to, based on, because I don't use measuring cups as many of you know, based on the number of cans you use, you can proportion the water. I'm going to probably put a half a can of water in, just because once that coconut milk starts to get hot, it's actually going to get pretty solid fast, so we're going to lose a lot of volume very quickly.
Sure.
So I add that half can of water. Alright. And I have a friendly wooden spoon You should probably use some stirring device that is non-reactive, so something that's definitely not metal. Normally, I would probably use chopsticks as well, so wooden chopsticks or wooden spoon, I think you're all set. So we're going to keep on warming this up, and the next thing we're going to add is sugar. So this is this is a medium sauce, or medium soup pot, probably. What I normally do is measure the amount of sugar by the rotations around the pan.
Sure.
So I'm probably at this point in time, I'm going to put about 2 rotations around the pan of sugar. I'm going to give the coconut milk a taste. This is really a dessert that you can adjust to your own palate. As a rule of thumb, I normally make mine a little less sweeter than how you would possibly eat it if you went to a shop. But you can always add more sugar if you want. So, here we go. 1 and 2. Boop. And I'm gonna stir the sugar, make sure it all dissolves within the coconut milk. And I'm gonna keep on keeping an eye on this and let the coconut milk tighten up a little bit before I add the corn in and also the cinnamon as well. So we'll keep on stirring and we'll see you soon. So we've been stirring for about 13 minutes. I turned up the flame a tiny bit because on medium, at least with this stove, it was definitely too cool and the coconut milk was not thickening up a little bit. So now you see that there are tiny little bubbles in the coconut milk. It's starting to condense a little bit. You can kind of, as you stir across the bottom, you can feel a little like thin layer of collection. And that's exactly the point where it's good to start putting in the corn. Besides that, in all of the stirring, I also added another tablespoon of sugar. Again, as I had mentioned before, this is a kind of dessert that you can really adjust to your taste. I tasted the coconut milk and it was a little bland, so I put in some more sugar so that it would be a little bit sweeter. So at this point in time, it is time to add all of this nice corn that we have pulled off of the cob. I'm just going to scoop it straight in.
We haven't made this in a while. I kind of love this dessert. What I've always really enjoyed about it is it's a very simple flavor profile. It's just the sweetness, and you have the back end of the coconut, and then the kind of richness of the corn, and it ends up coming out to be this really satisfying, very pleasant tasting dish.
Yeah, it's a very simple dish. There's not too much complexity about it. It's kind of the direct comparison in terms of other things. Like, I always think of it as like a really nice, like just sweeter version of congee, oddly enough.
Sure.
It kind of has the same satisfactory level as congee does. So I've now added the corn. I'm just going to keep stirring this up. You see that the corn is nicely, pretty even in terms of volume to the amount of coconut milk. And at this point in time, I'm going to add my one Western ingredient to this. I personally just put it in because I think it tastes nice. You can totally skip it if you want. But I'm just going to add about 3 shakes of cinnamon.
That's nice.
And that kind of just gives it an extra layer of warmth. And don't worry, it looks like there's a lot of cinnamon there now. It's going to cook down for a little bit, and that cinnamon will kind of break down and really like fold nicely into the corn. That's what I found was the best part about adding the cinnamon. It doesn't necessarily kind of block off the flavor of coconut milk, but it really adds richness and warmth to the corn itself. And so we'll keep on stirring this for probably about a couple more minutes, and then I'm just actually going to put a lid on it and let it stew for about 15 minutes all by itself. So we've been stirring now for about 15 minutes. I've actually turned down the flame because once you put the lid on the stove and on the pot, sometimes you'll start to see the coconut milk bubble, and when it bubbles, you want to open up the lid, stir it up, make sure that the coconut milk doesn't curdle. So I turned down the heat. I also opened up the lid because this was bubbling right before you saw me, and just kept on stirring it up. And now it's time to add tapioca. So here is my bag of tapioca pearl. You can see that previously I have made this dessert. And I'm actually going to use a measuring cup here. And we're going to put in about 2/3 of a cup of tapioca.
And that measuring device you have is 1 cup, correct?
Yes, 1 cup. So I'm going to measure about 2/3. Again, this is rough. And of course with this dish, it's all about taste, right? If you want more tapioca, you can always add more tapioca too. This is the amount that I'm going to put for today. So, all right. Now I'm just going to stir it up. Mix the tapioca in. We're going to let the tapioca cook, and it's actually going to make this thicker. And eventually you'll notice that you'll start to see like little clear pearls in the dessert. And that's when you know that the tapioca's been cooked all the way through. Some of your tapioca may melt a little bit. That's perfectly fine. That'll add a nice kind of texture to the soup. Again, this is really super easy. And with that addition of tapioca, you've added another starch, so things have gotten a little bland. So what I'll normally do is I'll probably put in about another tablespoon of sugar.
Excellent.
I'm going to stir this up.
Now, is this dish served hot?
Yes, it's absolutely served hot. You don't have to. We, in the Fierro house, eat it cold quite often.
I love it.
I generally heat it up, but you don't have to heat it up. You can certainly eat it cold, but it's definitely great to eat right out of the pot. This isn't like stovetop pudding where you have to cool it off a little bit and then wait for it to tighten up. This you can eat straight off the pot when it's done. So I've stirred and tried to evenly incorporate the tapioca. I'm going to put the lid on for about maybe 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to give it a taste and see if we need to do any final tweaks, and then it'll be pretty close to being done. So this has been left to cook for about 10 minutes. I'm stirring it all up, making sure that there's the tapioca at the bottom is getting scraped up. And given this consistency now, we see that there's a lot of corn, a lot of coconut milk. I generally, as a rule of thumb, prefer a little bit more tapioca, so at this point in time, I'm actually going to add a little bit more. Probably going to add about another 1/3 of a cup more. Alright, there we go. I'm just going to, again, stir it all in. And then we will let it cook for another 10 minutes. At this point in time, I'm actually going to lower the heat even a tiny bit more, because right now it's about at a medium high. I'm going to turn it down to like about a medium low. And we're just going to put the lid on this and let it continue to cook. And we'll probably only have about 15 more minutes of cooking, and then this dessert will be done. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes. And you see that the tapioca has now kind of soaked up all of the coconut milk, and now this actually has the consistency of tapioca pudding. And at this point in time, you can do one final taste. I've already done a taste off camera, and it's just as sweet as I normally like it. You can do another taste, and if you want it even sweeter, because I know people do like very sweet desserts, you can add more sugar too, if you would like. But this is done. So I'm going to turn off the flame, get rid of my mixing spoon, and trade it for a ladle. And I'm just going to scoop some into a bowl.
I like this. I almost treat it like a sweet corn chowder, so whereas I guess most desserts would be like 1 or 2 ladles full, I probably end up eating like 4.
Oh, I always eat at least like 2 or 3 or 4 ladles. Normally I start with 2 and then I eat 4. But that's it. This is my version of Che Bap. Enjoy.